Now we're going to move on to unity and building movements. This conversation with Briahna Joy Gray and Cenk Uygur, it revealed something. There's something I want to touch on about it. And for me, this is not about, the personality issue. It's about how do we move forward? How do we build these movements? And I'm going to show you an example of that with those of us over at RBN. Because what I noticed from this conversation is that part of the reason why movement building isn't happening is because there's too much focus on personalities instead of focusing on what you can do with people in the community and in the streets. So Briahna Joy Gray interviewed Cenk Uygur, and she is talking to him about, can the left finally unite? And I know this is an interesting place to pause it, but this is the portion of the interview that I want to discuss because I know Cenk's face looks kind of funny there, but let's get into this discussion.
Anyway, I don't think, right?
Well, I think is the main point. And I'll say this, you said earlier, just now the question of whether or not our influence is gone. I'll tell you this, a squad member reached out to me in the spring of that year. I don't remember exactly when it was, but within a few months of Force the Vote, literally scheduled to have a phone call with me because they wanted to know what was next. They were like, okay, we didn't want to do Force the Vote because what was told to me was that they found the rhetoric toward AOC to be personally offensive. It wasn't a strategic, but wait a minute, Cenk, to me, this is an indictment of them. They didn't say that wait a minute. They didn't say that they disagreed strategically. They were more concerned about vibes and feelings than a strategic opportunity. But now this congressperson wanted to know from me, what's next?
So that part right there is very telling, that you actually had squad members or one of them reaching out to Bree asking, okay, what do we do now? And that again shows you that there was no leadership in reference to managing the politicians, the candidates that ran through Justice Democrats. There was no leadership after they won. It just kind of seems like the organization, I don't know what happened, but it seems like the organization kind of was just hands off after they got into those positions. So it was interesting that one of them reached out to Bree and was asking, okay, what do we do next? It's really interesting considering how far away they are from all of us now. And granted, I didn't have a show during Force the Vote at that time, but it's really interesting to see where it seemed like they were willing to still seek some type of advice compared to how it is now. Interesting.
And I said, there's nothing next, Congress member, because you squandered this opportunity.
Why did you say that? You should have asked for something.
There was nothing to ask for, Cenk.
Pause for a second. So this part I didn't understand from Cenk. He was upset because, Bree didn't know, what to tell them or say there is no next thing. And he said to Bree, well, why would you say that? First of all, it's not Bree's job to manage the members of the squad. She's not their manager. It just, that wasn't her job. In fact, Cenk, you and Kyle were the ones who created Justice Democrats. So it seems like you should have been the ones that were hands-on with them. I know you both walked away from that organization, but you guys were the ones that created the organization. It really was not Bree's job to lie and tell them what's next. That's not on her. And so what I noticed is Cenk was putting some of the blame here on Bree for certain things that really was not her job, instead of pointing fingers at the squad members and for them not showing up when the time was needed. How do you just stay silent during a pandemic and there is a call for you from the left asking you to push for a vote for Medicare for all? Yes, we all knew it wasn't going to pass, but the whole point was, I watched that whole debacle. We knew it wasn't going to pass, but the whole point was to show us who's who. So that way you can also have people primary challenge those politicians and get them out of office and replace them with the people who actually do support universal health care. It was a very exposing moment considering the fact we were in a pandemic. The reality is The squad decided to choose their political careers instead of fighting for universal health care. That's what the reality is. So that's not Bree's fault, but yet Cenk is putting it on her.
First of all, I'm a podcaster. I'm not sitting around. The genius of Force the Vote was that it was an amazing idea. It was such a good idea that I heard about it from Sam Cedar, who validated that Jimmy Dore, a mortal enemy, had a good idea. I was watching Sam Cedar show. I didn't watch Jimmy Dore. I was watching Majority Report. And I heard, wow.
Briahna, look, so when remember, Jimmy was not a mortal enemy in the beginning of this. He called me about Force the Vote, and I said, I generally... Wait a minute.
That's not true. That's not true. No. Even in the Sam Cedar segment that I was watching, he kind of made a little I'm not saying it was as bad as it is now, obviously, but he made a little joke about how, like, obviously I don't like, Jimmy Dore and the dumb left. But even I have to admit, this is a good idea. It was built into the segment I watched. And that was why I went over to Jimmy Dore to hear more about it. Because I was like, if this guy's validating it, it must be something.
You're just factually incorrect.
No, we can go back. Let's see if we can go and try to pull that video.
Go back and no, you're missing it, vividly. Briahna. Please listen. Sam Cedar has always hated Jimmy Dore. When they were both.
That's what I'm saying.
For God's sake, listen for a second. What I'm telling you is, when they were both in the TYT network, I liked both of them. I had a perfectly good relationship with both of them. Sam Cedar hated Jimmy Dore and would constantly attack Jimmy Dore.
What does any of this have to do with the squad not answering the call to fight for Medicare for all? Because this didn't just happen during Force the Vote. It also happened after Force the Vote. There were marches for Medicare for all across the country, in over 50 cities across the country. The only person who showed up was Cori Bush, and she showed up to the DC march, but then complained that she didn't appreciate what we were doing. You were here, why? What? How you show up to a protest and a rally just to tell us you don't like what we're doing? She could have stayed home for that. The point is, even after Force the Vote, they still weren't fighting for it. There were other opportunities that they could have participated in. AOC decided to go help Nina Turner's campaign instead of coming to neither one of what? So that has nothing to do. I don't care who like who. I don't care. I don't care about Sam Cedar not liking Jimmy not liking Sam. I don't really give a shit. That has nothing to do with the squad members who are the politicians at that point in time, not showing up when the call was made.
And I would try to get Sam to stop attacking Jimmy. At this point, when Force the Vote begins, at that point, I don't have any bad feelings. I didn't know that he had done the thing that he did to Anna. I didn't know that. So I had no bad feelings. So Jimmy calls me and says, hey, do you want to do this Force the Vote thing? I go, hey, strategically, I think that is the right path. I'm not sure about the tactics yet, Jimmy. And so let's keep talking about it. And in fact, you can go back and find videos of him saying, oh, Cenk agreed with me in the beginning. Cenk agreed with me. Yeah, that's right. Because as I've explained here for over an hour, I not only agree with that strategy, I was executing that strategy, but not that specific tactic. But when we said, hey, I don't agree with this tactic, that's when Jimmy went rogue and started smearing everyone who didn't agree and went and made it a toxic cesspool. So Briahna, when they reached out to you and said, what's next? What happened was, after we were done with Force the Vote, a relevant issue came up, $15 minimum wage. That's where
this was after that. This was gone. This was after that. There was nothing left.
No problem. So let's say that also passed. But when I asked for help there, everybody was like, no, we're mad at you. Jimmy's our boss, and he says we're all mad at you, so we're not helping on $15. Wait a minute, I thought we were a movement. Well, you're not helping on $15 minimum wage? What is wrong with you? I don't mean...
Pause. So here's the problem that I noticed with this whole movement idea, at least coming from Cenk. Why does the movement rely on you having a coalition and support from other podcasters? Why does it rely on that? Cenk has numerous resources. He has a network of people that he can contact, that he can reach out to. He has access to people that I don't have access to. Why does a movement rely on you having a coalition with podcasters? If some of those podcasters at that point in time were not willing to work with you in reference to moving towards the push for the $15 minimum wage, okay, you couldn't organize no other people? You couldn't pull together any other people? Why not pull together people in the community? Why does this have to revolve around podcasters doing this? And that's the question that I have. When we talk about movement building, are we talking about building a movement in the community, hitting the streets, or are we talking about building a movement with YouTube podcasters? I think that's a question we need to ask ourselves.
I mean generically. And then, okay, fine, we're past that. But Briahna, everybody then went like, I'm taking my ball and going home. No, brother, we got a 2-year window.
That's not what we did. I don't know what was happening in your world.
And that's what I did. But everybody else left when their feelings were hurt.
I don't know what was going on in your world, but that is absolutely not what's happening in my world. Nobody took their ball and went home, and we all forcefully pressured and talked about to the best of our ability the squad's failure to push on $15 minimum wage, Pramila Jayapal whipping the votes against them doing exactly that. And we covered it ad nauseum on this show and every other show on this side of the left that I remember. And while I got to say, Cenk, you talked earlier in the podcast about reaching out and extending olive branches. I hope that that's true. And I hope I see that going forward. But you and I had our conversation on your show because I reached out to you and invited you on my show. And you declined, but said I could come on yours. And I did. And I'm glad we had that conversation. But I have not felt the ability. I have not felt olive branches reached out to me. And I have not felt the ability to reach out to other people. It was me that invited Sam Cedar in the wake of Force the Vote onto this show to have a conversation. And I have,
Briahna,
I
if you want to get into that level of personal grievance,
it's not personal grievance. I'm really actually trying to bury the hatchet. I'm going to say that I think it's constructive. I hate, can I just be honest? I hate that there are all these people who are in my own community that I don't talk to anymore, that I can't have as guests on my show, who I see making funny, informative, smart content, but I feel like can never bury the hatchet over something that was a tactical disagreement that turned into saying some of the ugliest things. Again, I don't want to talk about the reasons I'm offended, but suffice it to say that I was grievously offended by some of the very personal things that were said at the time. But I just want to say for the record right now, I would be more than happy to bury the hatchet going forward. I think, and this is what I wanted to ask you about. I'm happy to keep going if you have time, but if not, we can end it here.
Let me pause for a second, because what this shows me again is that, yeah, I totally hear you, Michelle. YouTube podcasters have a lot of reach. Totally. Thank you for saying that. I totally hear you. But here's the question I have. Should it be led by podcasters? Maybe the movement building should happen with activist groups and activist organizations on the outside. They can always come onto those shows and promote it and get the word out, but maybe it shouldn't be led by podcasters. Because movement building doesn't mean building within the YouTube space all the time. And I think that's the thing. I don't think these movements should be led by podcasters. I'm just keeping it real. I'm a podcaster myself, but I was an activist before I was a podcaster. I still do activism. I'm going to show you what that looks like. But what I'm saying is, part of the reason is because of the personality differences, because all it takes is for one or two podcasters to have a disagreement with each other and the whole damn movement can fall apart. Whereas if you had an organization like PSL that is able to get hundreds of thousands of people out into the street for the pro-Palestinian marches, if you have an organization like Answer Coalition put these kind of things together, you get past the podcaster personality differences. And I think, yes, those movements should always be promoted on these shows. Just like we've done the pro-Palestinian march promotions on these shows where people have come on. They should always do that. They should go into Bad Faith. They should go on to Breaking Points. They should go on to Rising. Those things should still entertain in the space. They should still do that to get the message and the word out. But what I come to realize, listening to this discussion between Bree and Cenk and thinking about all the things that happened with Force the Vote, I do not think it is a good idea for podcasters to lead any of these movements anymore. And I sincerely hope that does not hurt anyone's feelings. There's too many, clashes. There's too much drama. There's too many personality, differences. Everybody not on the same page. People be pissed off at each other for the stupidest reasons. So I think a movement should not be led by podcasters. And that includes you, Cenk, as well.
But going forward, as we're trying to reconstitute the left in 2024 and get behind a candidate in the general election, what are we going to do? Because there are a number of candidates that are fracturing left attention right now. And I don't want this to be a situation where we have a fragmented left that disempowers our ability, especially with Gaza happening, disempowers our ability to put real pressure on the Democratic Party to stop a genocide.
Yeah. So, look, definitely is my answer. Now, let me give you the context. So, at TYT, I have platformed literally hundreds of progressives, both candidates and hosts. We've started, half of the hosts that exist now in the progressive ecosystem at some point were at TYT and Young Turks. So, and I kept going, and I'm still going to this day. We have dozens of hosts.
And that's part of the problem. And I have to call this out. Yes, a lot of these hosts did start at TYT, or they were a TYT affiliate. So like Secular Talk was an affiliate of TYT. David Pakman started at TYT, Sean King, Humanist Report. A lot of them did get their start there. But that's part of the problem. Because a lot of those shows got their start at TYT, somewhere along the way, TYT became the gatekeeper for the progressive left, meaning that it had to start and end at TYT. So like the Medicare for All marches, for example, there was pushback because it didn't start and wasn't initiated at TYT. Right? This call to move towards third party and independent candidates and go outside the duopoly. There was a lot of pushback because it didn't start, at TYT. When we did the General Strike Summit over at RBN, we got a lot of criticism and pushback from people who are prominent figures that I didn't even know at that point in time because it didn't start at TYT. We didn't go through the proper channels. That's what we were told. So that is part of the problem. You have become a gatekeeper. And so if it's not starting with Cenk Uygur, if it's not his idea or Anna's idea or the TYT's idea, then it is dismissed by TYT. And that's not just Force the Vote. I told you about the Medicare for All marches as well. They didn't platform that either. Again, it has to be their idea. This is something I learned working with faculty members in higher ed. I figured out how to get along with faculty. You present an idea to them, but you make them think it's their idea. Isn't that crazy? But it works. So that's the thing. They are the gatekeepers. If it doesn't come from them, then it doesn't get mass support and it doesn't get massive exposure.
Even though I know for a fact that a whole bunch of them will at some point turn on us and say outrageous and toxic and totally false things about us. But I still keep going and I still keep reaching out. And I'm on this show and I went on and I had you on our show and I keep reaching out and reaching out and reaching out. And then every once in a while,
I instigated that, Cenk. I reached out to
you. You're saying, hey, wait a minute. I asked you to be on a podcast and so your hundreds of progressives that you have platformed and helped and launched into the world don't count because you didn't go on the podcast in exactly the right way that I wanted.
No, it's quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. I think that the reason that I try to stay out of the personal stuff is because I think that what you do is enormously valuable. I think that what Sam Cedar does is enormously valuable. Those are huge platforms with smart people who share my politics, 99%, who are advancing my politics. And I would prefer not to say or do anything that diminishes their ability to do good work. quite the opposite of what you're saying, in fact.
Well, look, with the last two things that I got to go and do the Young Turks. Look, Briahna, in my opinion, when a friend and an ally is attacked in a vicious and false way, and people can see this on tape, I get their back. This whole blogs and things that got me smeared by the mainstream media started when I backed Sam Cedar when the alt-right attacked him on some nonsense joke he did, pretending that he was a groomer, etc.
You see, this is the problem. This is why V says, wrong take, Sabby. Anyone can get their feelings hurt, even non-podcasters. Yes, you're right. Anyone can get their feelings hurt. The difference is those are organizations that have the resources and they have the experience, putting forward those large ass rallies. This is why a PSL can get like 200,000, 300,000 with Answer Coalition and get all those people in the streets for the pro-Palestinian marches. Yes, people are going to butt heads in activist organizations too. Yes, I know, I've been a part of them. But the difference is, notice that the movement continues. Notice that the action still continues. Instead, what you end up with, particularly with people like Cenk and all the other people that butted heads in reference to force the vote, there's a lot of ego. And this is something that really turns me off. I really am turned off by ego. So if I feel you got a huge ass ego, I will pedal away from you. I don't like it. I don't like it. So people didn't just get all in their feelings. People also exposed their ego. And if people aren't willing to let their ego go, you're not ready to lead no movement. And the movement leading, it should be horizontal. This is something we learned from the Black Panthers, right? Horizontal organization where everybody's on the same level, not this one solo person, trying to call all the shots. And then you wouldn't have some of these issues. But when there's a lot of ego involved and you got people say, we're the ones who started this and everything started at my network and yada, yada. These people's egos have become inflated. And I've seen it over the years. Cenk Uygur, Anna Kasparian, these people have huge egos. They can't sit up here and tell me that they don't. So until the ego goes away, how are you going to fix the personality differences?
You see me defending progressives all the time when they are attacked, because I've been through it 100 times. When someone doesn't not so attack, and he did it, I forget if he did it to Sirota first or Ryan Grimm first or whoever he did it. I was like, oh my God. And I went and rushed in for help. When you don't come and help, and when you say, I'm indifferent to it, I don't really care what he calls you. I'm going to call it whatever it is, okay? I'm asking you, going forward, can you just pause for us? And not you, just you, but the whole movement. Can we all just pause for a second and go, wait, is it right for one of our own to attack someone in the movement with no basis in fact in a way that is so maniacal that of course they're going to have, like, are we supposed to be dogs? And go, oh, yes, sir. Of course we are backed by CIA, sir. Of course. But we will work with you nonetheless, sir. I mean, that is the most unbelievable ask. And so I'm asking you to think about it if it was you. I mean, look, I had you on a podcast and you caught feelings that I didn't go on your podcast. That is so tiny compared to what we were called.
No,
and I don't say this like a...
That's not the point.
No.
See how this goes nowhere? With him saying, no, I was called a name. So-and-so said this about me, da-da-da. None of that has anything to do with the fact that the squad did not deliver during a time when we were in a pandemic. This policy, this strategy of force the vote came from the DSA handbook. It's right there in the DSA handbook. AOC's member of the DOC, like DSA, they know this. They know what they're supposed to do. When you have a narrow majority, you use that power to push forth for Medicare for all. It's right in the handbook. So when they act like they had no guidance, they didn't know what to do, the steps and the instructions were right there for you.
Briahna, I'm not saying it to say ha-ha to you. I'm saying it because I'm trying to evoke some degree of empathy from you guys. Do you not see that if somebody goes, like, you sense like 2% of it and you were worried about it? Imagine if you got the whole thing, because some lunatic starts saying that you're secretly being paid by Nancy Pelosi, and then everybody goes, yeah, well, work with that. Briahna, it's your fault. Work with that person. Work with that person. It's your fault. You're starting to split the movement. You'd be like, what are you guys talking about? That's crazy. Why isn't anybody helping me? Why are they supporting this lunatic instead? But I can't get you to see that, and I don't think I'm ever going to get you to see that.
Well, see how that goes? Why isn't anybody helping me? Again, it's about the ego.
So I'm done with it.
I don't want to go tit for tat. I can sit here and pull up all the old tweets of the mean-spirited, very personal. I spent most of February in my studio apartment sobbing by myself. I didn't have a network. I didn't have TYT. Ryan Grimm was one of my closest friends and allies in this situation. He gave me my first job. I see him as a mentor, and I felt like I couldn't even talk to him about it because things got so toxic. Like I can't appeal to you with my humanity. So I don't want to frankly go back there. It was one of the darkest times of my life, to be honest. I was so fucking depressed.
Is the people surrounding him enabling him when he puts out ridiculous conspiracy theories, like calling me someone who's being funded by NATO because I interviewed Madeleine Albright once. So direct question to both Katie Halper and Briahna Joy Gray. Do you guys think that I'm paid by NATO?
So even this right here, why was she bringing Bree and Katie into this? You see what I'm saying? All of this, so-and-so said this about me. All of this was just a distraction instead of focusing on the actual issue at hand, which was healthcare. You can't. Who cares, Anna? Who gives a fuck? If you know you're not being paid by NATO, you can go on this stream like you did and say you're not paid by NATO and just let it fucking go. These are adults. To me, who gives a fuck, Anna? If you know you're not, then don't worry about it. But there was all of this bickering back and forth and stuff. And this is why I said, no, these movements should not be led by podcasters. Just going forward, they need to be led by people, the activist organization, the people already out in the streets, the people who knocking on the doors. Someone mentioned it here in the chat. They said, yes, Soccer Papa says, Sabby, you're 100% correct. It's the same thing as a salesperson selling over the phone or via email versus the one who's knocking on doors. Yeah, like I just don't understand that. I look back on it and I think that was a mistake. Ay.
And if you don't, why don't you say something? Do you think that Sam Cedar is just a corporate shill? And if you don't think he is, then why don't you say so? I just think that this effort has been so destructive, so toxic, and so disgusting. And don't tell me not to focus on Jimmy Dore when they've decided to put Jimmy Dore front and center in this entire thing.
Go. There goes again. So see what I was saying? Why you can't look. We've gone through Forced to Vote on this show multiple times before about some of the things that could have been different. But one of the things I will say here is, again, a lot of this had to deal with personality differences and ego. It's really sad. Actually, you look back on it. It is really sad because I think about what could have been done.
Go back and look at what I look like on the videos of January of 2021. I look not great. And so suffice it to say is that I could sit here and tell you all of the deeply hurtful comments that people in your orbit have made, but I truly have no interest in asking you to apologize for Nomiki Konst or Anna Kasparian or any of them. I don't care. They are I'm responsible for their actions. You're responsible for yours. And frankly, I'm willing to bury the hatchet on it all. But you seem to have a different requirement of me.
Briahna,
you want me. Let me tell you this, Cenk. I have no interest in throwing Jimmy Dore under the bus or casting aspersions or one way or the other. But I want to make clear, I have talked on the phone with him, I think, once, maybe twice in my entire life. And it was around organizing the Medicare for All rally that was held in January of 2021 in Washington, D.C., talking through logistics of how to put that together. I have had no other relationship with him other than what you see in public on Twitter. I've maybe DM'd him a couple of times. Hey, did you see this clip? What do you go? You know, those kinds of things, including back during the campaign when, frankly, he got really mad at me at some point about something. I can't even remember what.
Of course, he always
but this
gets really
idea
mad at
that
everybody for over everything.
but the idea, but who cares? People have feelings and people get sentiment. Like,
care
we're
when it's
different.
your
I
feelings.
appreciate that. But Cenk, you were just screaming at me at the Hill like a month ago, and I decided to brush it off. I don't care. Like, you called me a bunch of names on the Hill. We'll splice that in too. But I'm just trying to encourage you to maybe have a little bit of a duck water roll off kind of attitude to some of this and stop requiring that everybody kind of fight your battles, or we'd all be mad at each other. Half of my audience wants me to hate David Sirota. I don't want to. I like David Sirota, and I think he is intelligent and valuable in this space. Same with Ryan Grimm. And it's okay. They can wish I had a different attitude to them. I can wish they had a different attitude to them, but they can still like me and I can still like them. And that's okay, right? Why can't that be okay?
So A, definitely. B, look, if you think Davis, like, I'm not saying you, obviously, you just said you're good with them. If you think David Sirota, so I will tell people in your audience so they can get mad at me all over again. If you think David Sirota and Ryan Grimm are not intelligent people that are very, very helpful to the progressive movement, you have no earthly idea what you're talking about.
Well,
so first and foremost, again, he's going back to the personalities. Who cares? Well, why do you care, Cenk? Why do you care what people think about Ryan Grimm and David Sirota? Who gives a fuck? What does that have to do with the freaking movement? Because you see, I want to bring up the example of the civil rights movement. Do you guys think during the civil rights movement, everybody got along? Because they didn't. Do you think people in the civil rights movement, activists, didn't butt heads? Oh, yes, they butt heads. They even butt heads with the NAACP. Because the NAACP weren't too keen on them doing that march on Washington, by the way. I don't know if everyone knows that. They were not on board for that in the beginning. So there were activists that were a part of that butt heads. You think people that were a part of the women's rights movement didn't butt heads? Yes. There's always going to be disagreements, but notice how they still accomplish the task at hand. The problem that I have, particularly within the podcast space, when I look at the activism part, is that the tasks don't get accomplished because people can't get past the bullshit. And maybe that has to deal with, or maybe that has to be part of like not having experience in activism. But I have experience in activism, and there's always going to be bullshit. There's always going to be conflict, and everybody's not going to agree on everything. But the goal is to accomplish the task at hand. And so that's why I continue to say, I don't think these should be led by podcasters, because the reality is, if you have a show and you choose to try to start like some type of movement or whatever, yeah, there's going to be people butting heads and stuff like that. But because you're the one that's on camera, and if you're the one that started it, when shit goes wrong, everyone's going to be looking at you on camera and blaming you. Just like when Justice Democrats failed, when the squad failed, who did people point their fingers back at to? Cenk Uygur and Kyle Kulinski, because people said, you guys were the ones that started this Justice Democrats. You're the ones that told us to go out there and support the squad. Now they're in there and they're not fighting for us. What say you? But I think we are a great vehicle for people to promote those actions on. I just don't think we should lead it. I just don't think we're talking about a big, massive type of move. I think we need to leave that to the organizations that are already out in the streets and let them do it.
They don't doubt their intelligence.
Reporters that we have. They're the two most honest, smartest, strongest people we have. So
they don't doubt their intelligence, Cenk. What they criticize, because people are allowed to make narrow criticisms of folks that have also positive attributes. What they criticize is to the extent that they, in their reporting, perhaps is too credulous of the incentives of squad members and gives them too much benefit of the doubt, and in effect, constructively, whether or not it's their intent, runs cover for the squad as they do things like, we agree on, fail to use their leverage at any point during that small margin 2021, 2022 term to advance the values and goals of the left.
Okay.
Right? Can't
So-
that?
Right, because you get to write a book about the squad. If you're Ryan Grimm, you get to write a book about the squad by having access to the squad. And in order to have access to them, you have to be nice towards them. You have to give them favorable coverage. That's another example why I don't think people in this space should lead these movements. The access issue is another one.
Can't that
No,
be a thing?
But again, that's super unfair to them because they did exactly the right thing. They thought it was the wrong tactic to use in the beginning, and then when it came time to use the tactic, they were 100% right, and they did put that pressure on. So
Well, look,
they
I
were.
talked to Ryan about it. I talked to Ryan about it on this show, and he conceded. And people can hear his own words for themselves. I don't mean to mischaracterize him. You can go back and listen to that episode from the summer of 2021. But he conceded some pretty important points about the strategic considerations that were being made at the time and the arguments that he was making at the time, some of which were not accurate.
Okay.
I'll leave it at
Look,
that.
if you are so hopelessly radicalized that you think Sirota, Grimm, and me are sellouts, then no one will ever be anywhere near pure enough for you. And I don't.
So we're going to fast forward just a little bit, but that just proves again what I was saying about too much focus on the personalities instead of the issue at hand. And EG, you hit on this as well. The focus should always be on the issue. Damn the personalities. That's right. That's right. This part right here.
Yeah, and Briahna, why am I on here? My campaign's over. There's no reason to be on here other than to go forward, right?
Well, I
So
appreciate that. I really do. I really
so-
do. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I was going to say, for God's sake, not just with me and you, but with the audience. Yeah, okay, even if you just caught feelings about what I said about Sirota and Grimm, and you think that they're whatever they are, I don't want to recharacterize it, okay? But you have your beef with them for whatever reason, and you have your beef with me for whatever reason. I mean, if you believe the outrageous things, then you're probably not going to work with us. Like, who wants to work with a guy funded by Nancy Pelosi? Okay, fine, right? So, okay, please, then I don't want to work with you. You don't want to work with me. Great. We agree, right? But for everyone else that, for God's sake, cares about the movement, passing bills, because guys, whether I win, somebody else wins, somebody was the face, the other person was the face, someone's the leader, the other one's the leader. Who cares? If you don't pass the bills, then we all collectively have done nothing.
So first of all, a correction here. There is no progressive movement. The movement actually ended when the squad turned their back on us. And then also when Bernie Sanders walked away from the movement. There's no progressive movement. I don't know why he's pretending like there still is, but there isn't. So, you know, so there's that. There's that.
We must unite. We must unite to try to keep our eyes on the prize, which is to actually pass these bills. So what I'm doing next, Briahna, is I'm taking the kernel of the volunteers, et cetera, that I had on my campaign, and I'm starting something called Operation Hope. And I'm going to try to bring it over to TYT. It's in transition, et cetera. And if you find it, if you stumble across it at some point and you like what we're doing, great. No one has any obligation. No one, you don't worry, you could hate me and you don't have to do it. And you could be like, bah humbug on hope. I don't want it, or I don't want it with you. Anything's fine. But if say, hey, you know what? It seems like a worthy effort. Maybe if we get together, we can organize the internet and organize our movement and organize young people in a way that could actually help the rest of average Americans.
Well, what is it?
That would
So here we go again. So you see part of the problem here? Here he is again trying to start another thing or a new thing, right?
be
What is
beautiful.
it, Jay? What is Operation Hope?
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to create a central hub where, because our videos and our memes go to a lot of people, go to millions of people, and to great, wonderful, I'm happy about it. But it's not enough. You have to create an amplifier. Part of the reason that I try to get on mainstream media, which is now hopeless, is because they have the amplifier. Whatever they say gets amplified 1,000 times over by the rest of media covering, right? And that's a huge advantage that the establishment has and that the progressive movement doesn't have. So I decided, well, okay, we can't break into that. They've got us, I'm canceled on all 3 cable networks, and that's now confirmed. So instead, I'm going to try to bring it up from social media, because social media can be an amplifier. So, for example, I'll throw out one idea, but I want in our town halls and in our Slacks, etc., for all of us to come up with the idea together and to push together and to come up with tactics together. And by the way, as we do that, there'll be slight hurt feelings. So they didn't do my tactic, they did the other tactic, etc. But we can't let that affect us. We got to stay on the same boat. And so one potential example is the Ohio ballot measure for higher minimum wage. Nina Turner's in Ohio. Her group is already trying to help with that measure. Ballot measures are direct democracy. It's one of the few places we have left for direct democracy. And that we could all begin to influence the social media and get enough attention to it so that it passes. But I give you that as just one of hundreds of examples that we can come up with together and then act together. Act together online and then act together in the real world.
So see what I mean? How once again, it has to go through TYT. They have to be the one to initiate it. When we talk about coalition building, I think in reference to electoral politics, for me, it's whether or not are you still a part of the duopoly or are you post-duopoly? I am post-duopoly. So in reference to coalition building, if you're trying to work with me and basically say, hey, get together with me and help us, get this Democrat candidate, it's a no for me. That window has passed. I have already been a part of the Democratic Party, so not going back into that for me. Now, so in reference to electoral politics, if you still trying to work within the Democratic Party, I'm not interested in working on that project. That's just me. I can't speak for everybody else. When it comes to the grassroots and actions on the ground and things on the outside, depending on what it is, that could be a different story. But when it comes to electoral politics, I am not trying to work within the duopoly to get anything accomplished. I think it is a moot point at this point in time, right? I appreciate that he mentioned the ballot initiatives and ballot measures. I've been covering those for over a year. I do think direct democracy is important. A lot of the progressive issues have passed, but they passed on the local level, not on the national level. And I think ballot measures and ballot initiatives are incredibly overlooked in reference to a larger part of left independent media. And I do think there should be more attention given to that besides me.
I support that endeavor. I feel strongly that a lot can be done with the united left media. We struggle in a way that right independent media doesn't, because they are very well funded, because their interests align with corporate interests. But I think the Bernie campaigns demonstrated that we have a lot more power than we think we do when we do unite. So I look forward to hearing more about that. Quick round robin, Cenk. Going into the general election, the non-Biden candidates, Jill Stein, Cornel West, RFK Jr. Do you have a fighter?
No, I'm going to try to get some or maybe all of those folks on the show and hear them out, because I think that they deserve to be heard out.
So that right there was interesting, because that goes to show you, I don't watch TYT. I haven't watched in a long time, but that goes to show you he hasn't had them on the show yet. RFK Jr. I can get. RFK Jr. is kind of skittish, certain parts. He won't come on to like progressive media. He's kind of skittish. And I know other people that have reached out. But you haven't had on Cornel West or Jill Stein yet, or Claudia De La Cruz? All this time has gone by? No, because they're focusing on the Democratic Party.
And if you made me pick one now, I think Cornel West is kind of an easy one. There's a lot of things I don't agree with RFK Jr. on. And I think, but we have to see if it's, then we might get into tactical disagreements at a later time in the election cycle about whether to support.
Well, what about Dr. Stein because of ballot, if only because of ballot access reasons? Yeah, which Cornel West is struggling with.
So it gets complicated because I think third parties, if we had an effective third party, it could be a lifesaver. On the other hand, they have not been effective so far. So if at the end everybody takes 2 to 3% from Biden, now at this point it's not a matter of whether I want Biden to win or not. I hate his policy on Gaza. I don't think he's a sweet, empathetic man. I think he's monstrous in a lot of ways. But the very worst outcome is Trump winning. And so you have to be strategic in figuring out, which way is that vote going to go at the end. But we're not there yet.
So this is a point that I wanted to get to right here. So essentially, he's still willing to cave to Joe Biden. He's still willing. He may not do so himself, but still willing to tell people we can't get Donald Trump. When you say to your audience, we can't get Donald Trump, you're telling them to vote for Joe Biden. You may not say vote for Joe Biden, but you are telling them to vote for Joe Biden. And that is really important, right? So it is very obvious that there is a segment that wants to continue to work within the duopoly and a segment that wants to work outside of the duopoly when it comes to electoral politics, at least. And what's really interesting to me is that, because I watched this full interview, a lot of the discussion around force the vote and what did not happen and what could have happened, it seemed like to me, listening to what Cenk said, he basically let one personality, or actually a couple different personalities, decide or affect how things were going to move in reference to the next action for $15 minimum wage push with the squad. You let one personality, or one or two personalities, I think Jimmy and Sam Seeger, you let two personalities affect how you were going to movement build for the $15 minimum wage to move forward with that. Why were you relying on getting the support of those people? And again, I go to the civil rights movement. Guess what, guys? Not everybody that was a civil rights activist at that point in time got along with Dr. King. Not everybody agreed with some of the strategies and the tactics that they were planning. Guess what? They also had arguments over slogans, just like we do right now, right? We had arguments over defund the police slogan, arguments over from the river to the sea slogan. They had some of the same problems when they were organizing back then. So I guess the question that I have, guys, is, number one, there is always going to be some type of tension. There are going to be people that you may not agree with. You may have, drag out arguments or fights with these people, but you should never let one or two people basically affect some type of movement going forward for the next action. And that's exactly what Cenk did. I don't know if you guys realize that, but that's exactly what Cenk Uygur did. He let what happened during Force the Vote between a couple of personalities affect whether or not he was going to build some type of movement to push for the $15 minimum wage. You could have still done that movement without those people. You didn't need to have those people on. You think everybody that was a part of the civil rights movement stayed on to the end or stayed on to the March on Washington? No. Some people came, some people left. Some people came, some people left. There's always going to be disagreement. You're also going to have opposition. And you can see film, footage of civil rights activists beaten by the police officers, hosed, had dogs sicked on them. They didn't let that stop them from the task at hand. And yet we had podcasters, and Cenk is telling you he let that stop him from the next task at hand in reference to movement building. That does not make any sense. Not everybody is going to agree with you. Not everybody's going to have your back. And just because a couple of people did not have your back, Cenk, so you just decide just to not move forward with the next project to put pressure on the squad because you didn't get the approval or the agreement with Sam and Jimmy and all these other people? Who gives a fuck? Not everybody is going to go down your path. Not everybody is going to be on the same journey with you when you take that journey. Sometimes you may have to walk alone. But you still could have organized with the people that were willing to work with you and push for the $15 minimum wage. I think the focus on the personalities was also a distraction for you to not have to be able to do what you needed to do. You have a large platform. Why did you need to have Majority Report and the Jimmy Dore Show on for your project that you wanted to do? You didn't need to. These are the things I never really understood. Make it make sense to me, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody, can you make it make sense to me? TYT has over 5 million subscribers, more subscribers than the Jimmy Dore Show. And I think more than Majority Report. I have to double check. You had the most subscribers. Why did you need these other two people to be with you? Moving forward, I think this is what we should be focusing on. Because over at RBN, we organize. We do outreach. Not through electoral politics. Over at RBN, if you go to our website, you'll see the RBN chapters. So all of us, each one of us have a chapter. We launched it in May of 2023, right? Look at some of the things we do. These are the goals. Building a community library. Rome is working on that. We give out diaper and baby supplies, school supplies, disability community outreach, feeding the poor and the unhoused, housing activism, bill payment assistance. Like, this is what we focus on. This is what, when you guys see me on YouTube, when I'm not on YouTube, in fact, I have a meeting for this tomorrow. When I'm not on YouTube, this is what I'm doing. So it just, all the chapters here. There's me there's the Boston chapter. There's JB. He has the Orlando chapter. Rome has the Detroit chapter. Rome probably does the most out of all of us. Like, Rome is building the library. Nick has the Kansas City chapter. And CJ has the Long Beach chapter. And here's the thing, TYT has way more resources and a larger network than we do. Imagine what they could do if they did something like this. Imagine how many people they could help with their massive platform. We're doing the best that we can with the platform that we have, but do you imagine what this could be if TYT did what we're doing? But no, they're not. They're sitting there arguing about Jimmy Dore and Sam Seder. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? I used to buy into that too. I used to buy into the personality bullshit, but I feel like this show has evolved a lot over the past year and a half. And I had to pull away from that because I realized it wasn't helping anything. It wasn't helping anything. So you can also see, if you go to outreach, Tour for the Poor, because Rome does Tour for the Poor, and Tour for the Poor is actually became a nonprofit thanks to Rome. He organized all of that, right? Nick is a co-founder of 10 Demands to Justice. And I'm showing you this because a number of times people say, we're not doing anything. RBN, you don't organize, you don't do anything. Those are lies. 10 Demands for Justice, Road to Abolition, of course, Community Mutual Aid. There's me and a couple of things. What am I doing here? I forgot this. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. People say we don't do on the ground reporting. We do on the ground reporting. Hell, it was cold that day. Let me bark away from that. That was a cold day. Lots of these things that we do that people say we don't do. I was at Julian Assange rally in DC. I spoke at this event. Like, this is the type of stuff that I focus on. I talk to you about politics on YouTube. I interview people in the community. At the end of the day, I keep telling you these politicians are not going to save you. So I have something. When November is over and a lot of people will go back to sleep after election season is over, you got to have something to go to. And this is why I continue to say, push the organizing, push those things. This was Tour for the Poor, us giving out pizzas, us giving out clothes. You see this? Rome, free barbecues, all these different things that we do that people claim we don't do. We put these things together. Feeding people. Rome actually gives people free haircuts, cutting people's hair, building benches for people. in communities that have bus stops with no fucking bench. These are the kind of things that we focus on. So this is why I continue to say, there's the library. When Rome first got the building, still doing construction and things on the library. And no, people may not always agree with our politics, and that's fine. But the people in the community know that they can count on us to come through. And that's the question we need to start asking. Can you count on these people to come through? Can you count on Cenk Uygur to come through in the community? It's painful to me. It's painful to me when I see the amount of resources that people like Cenk Uygur has. Now, Bree has donated to these types of things. Bree has contributed to these types of things. She's amplified these types of things. There has never been a time where Cenk, who says he wants to do these movements, never been a time, and he knows who we are, never been a time where he reached out to ask us to come on the TYT to talk about this. Not once. Never been no time. You're not trying to build no movements. You're not trying to help people in the community. This is where it starts, on the ground. Ground zero. That's where it starts. It doesn't start in DC. It doesn't start with AOC. It doesn't start with Bernie. It doesn't start with these people. It starts with us. And if you look at what the Black Panthers have been doing over the years, they had the right model. They had the right idea. They knew that the government was not going to come through. So they built their own clinics. They started the free breakfast program. You want to know why schools have a free breakfast program? The Black Panthers started that. So those are the things that we do to help people. Because we know these politicians, they failed us a long time ago, man. They failed us a long time ago. You go to these communities, my parents' neighborhood in Baltimore still looks the same way it did when they grew up in it. It still looks like trash. These politicians haven't helped these people. Where were the politicians when you needed to put food on the table? Were they giving you free food? Where were the politicians when you got evicted? These are the kind of conversations that we have to start having. These are the kind of things we need to talk about. Thank you. Leroy says my family members were Black Panthers. Yeah, and these are the kind of things. And this is why I'm saying we have to find other ways to come together. And I do just feel like the focus is misplaced. The personalities are not going to help you. These people are not going to help you. You see who's helping you? Rome is helping you. The RBN Library in Detroit, building a library for people in Detroit. These are some of the pictures here. That was some of the work that Rome and his friend did this. You see, we don't have the kind of funds to hire a crew to do this for. We got to do this work. So these are the things that Rome did. The building was old. They know how to do, drywall and all this stuff. I don't know how to do drywall, but they know how to do all this stuff. All these things that people pretend don't exist. We're not doing nothing though. You see this? That's community activism. This is how you help the people. You're not going to help the people by arguing about Jimmy Dore and Sam Cedar. And the reason why these things are not highlighted is because, again, it takes away from electoral politics. And if it takes away from electoral politics, that can affect a brand like TYT. You can talk about both. I talk about both. But there's no reason why you should be putting your money towards electoral politics anymore at this point in time. Notice I bring candidates on the show, but I never tell you to donate to them. That's what I want you guys to do. Like, you guys you can still vote. You want to vote, I support a third party movement. I support that. But what I'm also saying is, like, I don't want us to ever believe, I don't ever want you to leave this show thinking that that is the end all be all, because it's not. So these are things that we can do